Assalamu alaikum and welcome to Perspective. We'll be talking about the ECP's petition in the Supreme Court, and of course after going to the Supreme Court on declaring the proceedings in the Lahore High Court null and void, we'll be talking about the ramifications of this development. Of course, we've also seen strict remarks come out of the Supreme Court on what's transpired in the Lahore High Court, and of course the ECP's stance on it, and of course also the fact that this was moved by the PTI, and what can we expect from this hearing? What kind of effect will this have overall on the political process? Of course, the elections of the February 8th, and what is the likely scenario going to be with regard to the elections of February 8th. All of that today. I have with me Umer Gilani, who is a legal expert. Thank you for being with us today. We also have with us Rafique Rajwana from the PML-N. Thank you for joining us. And Mustafa Abdullah Baloch from the PPP. Umer, like we were earlier talking about, as far as the ECP is concerned, as I understand, they've gone to the Supreme Court on this issue. The hearing is in progress. Of course, it's unusual in the sense that, of course, for their lordships to return and for the courtroom one to be opened again on this issue. Of course, it's integral as far as the elections are concerned, and the electoral process of the February 8th is concerned. How are you overall looking at this?
I think it's a very unusual situation to begin with, to see the Supreme Court in operation at this late hour. I think we are already at 8 p.m. Because as I think everybody knows, the courts normally operate in the daytime. So what urgency is it that has compelled the Supreme Court to call this hearing at this point in time and not perhaps hold the court on Monday? I understand the court is going on winter vacation, and that may be one of the reasons why they thought that before the judges disperse for vacation, a matter of this nature should be heard. But the question still remains, and I think the urgency is that the Supreme Court, perhaps the Election Commission certainly wants at this point in time to ensure that the elections are conducted by the early days of February. And there is the fear that if the Lahore High Court's order is not set aside or not suspended, the Election Commission will not be able to meet that deadline.
Okay.
So the situation remains uncertain, and I think all eyes are on the Supreme Court. The Election Commission clearly wants to have the order suspended. But what the Supreme Court will do is something
I believe it seems like we might have a decision very soon on this issue, but overall, of course, with the elections being extremely important as far as February 8th is concerned, the schedule, as I understand, is to be given out by tomorrow by the Election Commission.
The understanding was that the Election Commission will announce its schedule by tomorrow.
And
the only thing that can sort of stop it is some sort of a judicial order.
Why do you think, Umer, this move by the PTI at this time to go to court on this issue, when of course they've always been saying that elections on time are extremely important to them as a political party? We know that stance of from the very beginning. And also interestingly, isn't it true that in 2018 both the RO, as far as the ROs are concerned, the situation was what they're objecting to essentially?
So my recollection is that normally the elections are conducted under the supervision of the district judiciary.
Right.
And
also
I remember distinctly that in 2013 the then Election Commission requested the Supreme Court of Pakistan, presided over by Chief Justice Iftikhar Muhammad Chaudhry, to provide officers from the judiciary to who would act as ROs and ensure a fair election. This time around, the judiciary has so far been reluctant to provide these ROs to the Election Commission, which is why the Election Commission had to call in officers from the government. But they, why did the PTI go to court to begin with is a question which we are all a little
But haven't
surprised.
they sort of self-contradicted themselves on the issue of elections, on the stance that they have taken on the elections, from the very beginning, for them to, make this an issue? Like I said, as far as the 2018 elections are concerned, I think it's a matter of record that both, when we saw the presiding officers, they were comprising of both, bureaucracy and members of, the judiciary also.
So I think the PTI stance, I don't speak for the PTI, I think that's quite well known, but my reading of the situation is that the PTI stance is that we want the elections, but we also want the elections to be fair.
Or we also want the elections which go in our favor.
And I think the stance that they've taken in the Lahore High Court is that at least in the present situation where the government seems quite inimical to the PTI, they can't expect a fair election from in a situation where the government's own officers are presiding and they are ROs.
Which is what always happens, and perhaps suited them in 2018 but doesn't suit them now.
But I think,
like.
while one can somewhat make sense of what the PTI is saying, that we want not just early elections but also fair elections, what is a little surprising is the speed with which the Honorable Lahore High Court proceeded, because the PTI had challenged the vires of a section of a provision of law, section 51 of the Elections Act. And the general rule is that when you challenge the vires of a provision of law, you don't get interim relief, you don't get a stay order.
Okay. So this is a
little
unnatural.
The law is generally, the assumption is that the law is constitutional, and it is only if after hearing the case at some length that the court comes to the conclusion that the law is completely unconstitutional that you will set aside a decision. But in this case, the Lahore High Court, in a series of 2 hearings spread apart by less than 24 hours, simply set aside the election schedule. So for me, what is unusual is not the PTI stance, but the manner in which the Lahore High Court conducted these hearings. That there is certainly some questions that arise about what was going on.
Okay, and how do you, and maybe that is the reason why we've seen the Supreme Court also act in this manner, with opening, later in the day, and for them to take it up. And as I understand, I think that there will be a decision very soon.
I think the Supreme Court's, the speed with which the Supreme Court is acting is something for the Supreme Court itself to explain. But the Supreme Court was scheduled to go on winter holidays from Monday.
So you think maybe it's because of that?
And once it goes for winter holidays for 2 weeks,
then it becomes really difficult for the Election Commission to then move on.
It would have been very difficult for the Chief Justice to conduct a hearing, to bring those judges back from their hometowns. So perhaps that is why they went ahead.
But overall, also, of course, once the decision is in, we'll talk more about that. But overall, in terms of how the elections are going to proceed, we are looking at all parties apart from one. We are looking at parties wanting to go ahead and for there to be the February 8th being the date. We also, as far as the PTI is concerned, the intra-party elections that have just been held within their party also. The symbol now, where is that now, in your opinion?
The PTI's intra-party elections were set aside, which was the first in our history that the Election Commission went so deep into somebody's record. And then the new elections were also set aside, are also being challenged. And from the comments of the Election Commission, it seems that they will also be set aside. But I think this is a whole conundrum. And as a citizen of this republic who lives here and who hopes to continue living here, I really hope that the institutions that lead our country, the Election Commission and the Supreme Court of Pakistan, will play some sort of a neutral arbiter role and ensure that the elections are held in a timely manner and in a manner which is fair and demonstrably fair. Because the whole idea of the elections is to settle the dispute over power for at least 5 years. and that objective should be achieved.
But Umer, isn't it true that, you know, quite apart from what's happened in the recent history, you know, even if we look back at successive elections, all elections, you know, there are no elections that, you know, haven't been cast as unfair or controversial or whatever we may call it by one party or another.
Absolutely. I think that is the crisis of our democracy, and it's not the first time. There are people who would like to trace the history of this country from just a few months ago. Some would like to start it from 2018. But we really have to start it from the first elections in this country, which was in 1970. And I think the fact that we have not been able as a country, as a polity, to ensure that the elections are fair, and once the elections are fairly conducted, to accept the results with dignity, with sportsmanship.
And that applies to all political parties.
Yes.
I'm going to go to Mustafa Abdullah Baloch from the PPP with the same question. Ji, Mustafa, can you hear me?
Yes, Mahrukh.
Mustafa, there's, you know, we're talking about the elections. We will know what the you know, decision of the Supreme Court is on this issue in a little bit. But as far as this, you know, the elections, the sanctity of the electoral process, the elections themselves, and also of them being, you know, fair and also to be accepted by all political parties is concerned, historically that has been problematic. Isn't that true?
Yes, Mahrukh, I would agree with you that each time we have faced these kind of allegations by one or the other party that, you know, the concept of free and fair elections was not present. So I think that is the reason why till now democracy has not strengthened as it should have been. But I think right now what PTI is doing, they are trying to derail the process, and People's Party was the first party that called for timely elections, and at that time maybe other parties were not maybe ready for the elections, but we were ready. We have already gone through the parliamentary board meetings about who will contest where. So we have done our homework already. So we are ready for the elections, and I believe that is the only way for a smooth transition, because ultimately, how long can a caretaker setup run the country? You know, we have a lot of domestic issues, we have a lot of international things which are going on, and there needs to be an elected government. So I hope that the proceeding which is going on right now in the Supreme Court, the honorable judges would, give a clear message that elections should be on time, and I think 8th February is the date when elections should be held, and whatever PTI or maybe somebody wants to derail it or somebody wants to prolong it.
As far as these elections are concerned, you know, how does your party look at what's, you know, as far as Punjab is concerned, there are, you know, there is of course the PML-N, there is of course your party, your inroads into perhaps, you know, the south, and then there's also Sindh as far as the PPP is concerned. Overall, what kind of now that we're getting closer perhaps to February 8th, if that is indeed the day that the elections will be held, and it seems like that, what is your opinion on the overall amalgam, I mean the kind of palette that perhaps we will see come February 8th?
As a party, we are confident. We are holding conventions, and even KPK and in Punjab also, Chairman Bilawal Bhutto Sarkari has been holding conventions and interacting with the voters. And even in Balochistan, we did our Foundation Day program, and we are just like, you know, all set for the elections. But the problem is the voters are confused right now. With all these news coming out, the voters are confused that whether elections are going to happen or not. So this is not the right thing, because
it's fueling uncertainty. I think that's a pertinent point. Let's talk about that. Let me come back to you. Umer, you agree with what Mustafa is saying? I think that, you know, he has a point. When we were all, you know, to a lay person, perhaps when we look at what's happened with this petition, it does fuel uncertainty in a way, does it not? You know, when we're looking at political parties getting ready, we're looking at meetings being held, we're looking at interviews with regard to the elections, as far as, you know, we've seen as PPP, PML-N, you know, with their parliamentary boards, all of that. And then suddenly these petitions come up. So it does sort of, you know, give rise to the kind of uncertainty that perhaps is best to be avoided, considering our a little, you know, a vulnerable position, even as far as economy is concerned.
Right. I think I would humbly disagree with the suggestion that any kind of elections will steer this country out of its uncertainty, out of its crisis. What the kind of elections which will steer this country out of the political crisis which has engulfed it for the last year and a half is an election which is not just timely but also fair and acceptable to all political forces in this country.
An election which has never been held in the history of this country.
If you know, there's always got to be some sort of a
no, I'm saying I'm not saying that this election will not be fair. What I'm saying is that for it to be accepted by all political parties is something that, you know, is perhaps some too much to be expected.
I think you know, it's a two-way train. The Election Commission and the Supreme Court have to make sure that the elections are demonstrably fair, and then once the elections are demonstrably fair, there is a responsibility on the political parties, the ones who lose, to lose with grace. But it can't be just one side. You know, we need both of these, and if a political party has some serious concerns about the fairness of the elections, unless you do something or another to address those concerns.
Even delay the elections.
I think if that is what is required to address the concerns of various political parties, then so be it, because a fair election is what resolves what the Constitution envisages. And that I think is also what the Lahore High Court has
but maybe
said.
There is not, but maybe, Umer, that they address this political party's concern, and then another political party gets up and has another concern. Are we going to be addressing these concerns, or are we going to move towards an election with the election date in field when, you know, everything is happening according to schedule, and then, you know, there's this disruption? And I think one has to contend that this will lead to uncertainty, the kind of
I think the uncertainty that has been created by this episode is an uncertainty in what was initially planned, and I think that's the problem with the elections. The results of the elections can never be planned, should never be planned. The elections should be decided by the people of this country, the ones who pay their taxes.
Then let me go to Mustafa. Mustafa, if the elections of this country are going to be decided by the people of this country, then let the people vote. Isn't that true?
See, I can't understand why do we have to think about derailing the elections just for the sake of one party, which is going through some legal matters. So definitely they will have some issues, and they will question each and everything, you know, and that make this election controversial. So we can't just hold the elections forever just because one particular party is not comfortable with it. I mean, in 2008. Our leadership was assassinated, but we went for elections. We never asked for delay in 4 or 5 months, or we never questioned. There was a dictator sitting on the top. So we knew that things would happen, and we lost a lot of seats. My father was contesting elections. He lost a seat, but we never complained about it because we can't. We know if you delay it or maybe conspire for some kind of delay, things will go out of control. Nobody will then sort this thing out.
Right, fair enough. Umer, I think that Abdullah has a fair point. Even whatever has happened, whatever, you know, this country has, you know, unfortunately a complex history, and there have been times when elections have been held after, you know, quite a spate of time, and but they've had to go forward. And for the other political parties, perhaps, you know, they argue that it is because this particular party doesn't have a structure at this time, doesn't have the kind of amalgam, the kind of coherency, the kind of structure that they need for there to go into elections. They're ill prepared, and that is why they're looking for delay now. So that is also an argument that other political parties are making.
So I think You know, the plot is complicated, and that's precisely why there is a twist in the tale. So what the Lahore High Court has done is actually a bit of an unexpected move. And those who were clamoring for early elections earlier are the ones who have now thrown a snag. And I think that's partly, you know, as a lawyer and as a citizen, I enjoy that the idea of a constitutional democracy is that it never allows power to be entirely concentrated in the hands of one particular person, institution, or group. So whatever was earlier planned has been somewhat jeopardized by what the PTI has done and achieved in the Lahore High Court. And now let's see what the Supreme Court does. I want to reiterate my point. I don't think it is any kind of elections which will steer this country out of its imbroglio, its crisis. It is a fair and acceptable elections that is what we need to steer this country out of crisis.
Are you advocating a delay in the elections?
I think, you know, the quality of the elections is quite as important as their timing, and I simply don't see how.
But why is the quality of this election more important than the quality of all those elections that have been held in the past? Because, you know, there have been aspirations cast on all elections.
So let me harken back to history, because you know, let me take a leaf out of the Supreme Court's own book. Chief Justice Qazi Faiz Isa has most recently resurrected a presidential reference which was filed under the tenure of President Zardari. And that reference has something to do with the elections in 1977, which were conducted and which did produce a result. But that result was not acceptable to a lot of the political parties in this country.
I will come back on this point. I have with me Rafique Rajwana
Democracy itself got derailed. So
I will come back on that. Rafique Saab, Rajwana Saab, can you hear me?
Yes.
Ji, Rajwana Saab, there is, you know, we know that the election, as far as the Supreme Court is concerned, it is in process, the verdict that may come in on the issue of the elections as, you know, by the Lahore High Court, and we've seen you know, the PTI go to Lahore High Court on this. Why, in your opinion, have they gone now? Are they looking for a delay, in your opinion? Is it because, you know, they're not prepared? What is your opinion on this?
Timing is very important because supposedly the election schedule was to be announced tonight or tomorrow. Now, at this 11th hour, as the Supreme Court is dealing with the matter and the Honorable Chief Justice is dictating the order, and I was hearing the order which is being dictated. At the 11th hour, directly approaching to the High Court, and the Honorable Chief Justice has issued a notice of contempt, issued a notice to the petitioner before the High Court, who had applied to the High Court and got the notification of appointment of returning officers, district returning officers suspended. He has been summoned by the Supreme Court, and why a case of contempt should not be initiated against you. Now, the order itself, which is being dictated, it will come on the media, the complete order, but the parts of the order which are being dictated, it clearly shows that was a malafide action on the part of the person who approached the High Court. And with all due respect to the High Court also, it was not a case in which hurriedly such an order should have been issued, because it relates to the national issue, and if the elections are not held on 8th of February, and the order of the Honorable High Court amounts to delaying the election, not intentionally, but anyhow, it was according to the assessment of the High Court that the order was passed, and Supreme Court has taken it very seriously. So I think that it was an effort to delay the election, according to my humble view. By this reply is to be supported, it will be supported by the order of the Supreme Court, which is being stated. That's before me on the television screen, and I'm reading the contents which are being dictated.
As I understand, I think the Supreme Court has held the Lahore High Court's decision proceedings to be null and void at this time. I think the detailed judgment. Yes.
And the Honorable Supreme Court has restrained the High Court to proceed with the matter pending there anymore.
Yes, they've abstained. I'm presuming, Umer. I think I'll go to Umer. I'll come back to you, Umer. In that scenario, I think the Election Commission will proceed with its schedule, and things will go ahead as per schedule as far as the Election Commission is concerned.
Absolutely. I think if the Supreme Court, as has been recently reported, as we speak, if the Supreme Court has passed an order suspending the operation of the Lahore High Court's judgment, then the Election Commission and all the authorities in the country are bound to ensure that the ECP's earlier decision regarding the appointment of ROs is obeyed and it's implemented. There's no question of disobeying the Supreme Court on this question.
I mean, what is your overall take of this, and in the sense that, what do you feel the way that it's been disposed of? Perhaps it's because, they don't want any delay, and they want things to go on schedule, and they want this uncertainty to not be fueled in any manner. You can now comment, because I believe the decision is before us.
I have a tremendous amount of respect for the institutions of this country and the wisdom and the propriety of what they are holding is something I wouldn't easily question. But at the same time, the Lahore High Court's order has at least raised some questions about the, in paragraph 5 of the Lahore High Court order, the court observed that there are questions regarding the fairness and the availability of a level playing field to all parties. So, I'm sure the Supreme Court, in the ultimate decision that it authors, will certainly take stock of those concerns too. Because the Constitution envisages timely elections, but also fair, transparent ones. And that is what we expect from the institutions of this country,
And I think the Supreme Court has also asked the Election Commission to issue the schedule by today. So, I mean, of course, they want things to go on as per schedule and things to move.
Absolutely. I think that the Supreme Court is bound by the Constitution to ensure that the elections are done in a manner which is timely, because our entire constitutional framework is built around elections. The idea is that the government will come through the people's representatives who will be elected. So obviously something which is so core and central to the scheme of the Constitution has to be done, but at the same time the Article 218, which the Lahore High Court has relied upon, which I am sure the Supreme Court will also honor in its judgment, speaks about transparent and fair elections. So expediency and transparency and fairness, these are all concerns which have to be balanced. And we hope that the Election Commission and the Supreme Court will make sure, because ultimately it is on these institutions.
But Umar, what are the what are the criteria on which Article 2018, of which the Article 218 talks about? When they say that those standards are not being met, and the free and fair election, and to what you are talking about, where does and how does one meet that standard then?
So I wouldn't dare to speak for myself, but the Lahore High Court in the judgment which is under contention has observed that for instance the principal candidate, the prime ministerial candidate of PTI, former Prime Minister Imran Khan, is in jail. And
but
how can you expect?
There have been other, party heads who have been in jail also, and elections have still gone ahead.
Absolutely.
So in that sense, it's not something that has not happened before in this country.
Right. So I think you're absolutely right on that point, that what is now being claimed is not something that is unprecedented. But is that fair?
So, that itself will continue. Of course, we know this at this time. Again, like I said, things will proceed, it seems, as per schedule. And this election also, after the election schedule is issued by the Election Commission, which the Supreme Court has also said by today, in this election, for it to be fair, it's only going to, we've never had an election, like I said before also, which has been accepted by all political parties. For this election to be accepted by all political parties would indeed be, extraordinary, no?
I think there are questions of degrees of fairness, and there is a question of degrees of acceptability. Let me harken back to that example of what happened 45 years ago when in 1977 we had an election in this country which was completed and the results were announced. But were they acceptable? Did it resolve the constitutional crisis in the country which prevailed in that year?
But Umer, does it not go back, I mean, this is not a purely legal question, but does it not go back to, the same kind of mindset that perhaps the former Prime Minister, PTI chief, was earlier also known for, where he thought that his popularity was, off the graphs, and that popularity, and when it was not, seen through anything tangible, it was because the institutions were wrong, or the elections were wrong, or the people had not been heard. We've been hearing that has been going on for a while. So this seems to echo that point. I mean, if people want to vote for a political party, any political party, and by all intents and purposes they are that popular, I'm not talking about only one particular political party, I'm talking about all political parties. We also have PML-N, where the former Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif Sahab has returned, and they say that their party is extremely popular under his leadership and after his return. So whichever political party is claiming that, let the people vote.
I agree with you partially on that point, that no election has been accepted by all parties. And in fact, in 2018, the Supreme Court is now hearing Justice Shaukat Aziz Siddiqui's petitions. This morning they were hearing about the matter, and there's uncontrovertible evidence that the elections were rigged in a way to ensure that the former Prime Minister Imran Khan became the Prime Minister. So it's not the first time this is happening.
Let me ask Rajwana Sahab.
But is it fair? That question is.
Rajwana Sahab, then what is your answer? I mean, I don't know if you followed what Umer Gilani is saying here. He's saying that whether the elections are fair or not, the question is they have to be seen to be fair. Is that the reason why we are seeing a political party to go to this extent to and move to the court?
There is no cable to this that under Article 218 and onwards, Article 219, 220 and onward. 218 talks about it's the duty of the Election Commission of Pakistan to hold the election fairly, justly. Now, it is the duty of the Election Commission of Pakistan. Unfortunately, now it is a hot discussion that one of the party, PTI, is not being provided the equal opportunity. Now we have to see this allegation or this claim of PTI people or PTI on two sides. Number one, whatsoever they are facing, maybe some of the people are facing those cases which apparently shows it's a victimization. But the other cases which Imran Khan himself is facing and being tried for that, apparently, prima facie, because it depends on the quality of evidence which is to be led during the course of trial. And Imran Khan has equal protection. He should be given equal protection of Article 10A of the Constitution of due process of law. So, just to say that these are false cases or these are 100% correct cases, but prima facie, I will say that whatsoever has been done on 9th of May, and as far as the cipher case is concerned, and 190,000 million, whatsoever is the amount of that Al-Qaeda trust related to that. So I think that the Election Commission of Pakistan has done its work his job, his duty, and PTI and Imran Khan Sahib has approached the higher forum to get that order set aside, whereby he was disqualified and then he is facing the trial. But nobody can deny this fact that the election should be held fairly, justly. Now the question is that nowadays we have a strong feeling that under the planning, because the Punjab has the overwhelming numbers of seats in National Assembly as compared to other provinces. And in the past, Pakistan Muslim League N has been mostly leading in all the elections. And the apprehension to the other party is that this time the Pakistan Muslim League will also get more seats from Punjab. And a campaign has been started. I will again say at the cost of repetition that one part of the PTI have already said that they should be given the equal opportunity. Now, as far as we go, the day Mia Nawaz Sharif landed in Pakistan and the day he held a very big gathering at the Minar-e-Pakistan, so many things are being said for and against anyhow. Now we are in the field. Our party is holding the meetings, constant meetings of the parliamentary board for allocation of ticket to assess the candidature. So just to have this negative propaganda and to malign PML-N, so many things are being raised. This is also unfair for us. We think if they keep on saying like this, then as far as we are concerned, it will be unjust, it will be unreasonable. So the same way, we also seek the protection that it should be stopped and let the elections be held. Now the point on which the Honorable High Court had suspended that notification of appointment of the returning officer, the Honorable Supreme Court has observed that the High Court straight away prima facie accepted the allegations of the other party who had filed a writ petition in the High Court that the elections under the control of ROs who are from the executive will not be held fairly. So it doesn't mean that all the ROs, all the officials who have been designated as DRO and ROs are dishonest people or they belong to any party. The government officials are always loyal to the state, not to any political party. They are not supposed to be. So my request to all the political parties would be that protect your rights, seek your remedies about protection of your rights, fundamental rights, just and fair elections. But at the same moment, we PML-N are not in a position to manage everything or to manage anything, not at all. So let's go to the field, let's go to the election process and to try our luck. Any party can get the majority seat. Any party can get an opportunity to form the government. And we are hopeful. We have a right to claim that we are hopeful. We are in Punjab. Punjab is a stronghold. We have a right to claim, but we have not a right to rule. Let the people decide. If we get the majority, if we muster the majority.
Let the people decide. Fair enough. Mustafa, your quick comments. Unfortunately, we're running out of time. On the issue, I think that Rafique Rajwana Sahib has put it very succinctly when he says that it should let the people decide.
Actually, yeah, that's true. But I would like to say that the elections and the democracy cannot revolve around wishes of Mr. Imran Khan and PTI. If somebody has some kind of doubts about the fairness of elections, so electoral process can be better with the span of time. You can't just hold the elections just because one particular party is having some disagreements with the fairness of the elections. So I think that's a very undue demand that was from PTI, and I'm very glad that the Honorable Supreme Court has given the Election Commission the authority to just hold elections on the 8th of February.
Right, fair enough. Thank you so much for being with us. Umer Gilani, thank you for joining us today. Rafique Rajwana Sahib, thank you for being with us today. Mustafa Abdullah Baloch, thank you so much for your time. Overall, of course, As far as the Supreme Court is concerned, it has directed the Election Commission to issue the schedule as per its procedure, which is by today, and we will see things back on track as far as the election process is concerned, as far as the electoral process is concerned, and moving ahead for February 8th. Of course, at the end of the day, it's about letting the people decide. If the electoral process goes on, if we let the people choose who they want to govern them, only then can a parliamentary democracy function. Let's hope that we can go towards that kind of a democracy after these elections. Thank you so much for joining us today on Perspective.